This video is dedicated to all the brave people in the LongCovid support group. Millions of people worldwide now have LongCovid, and there are lots of survivors and lots of people that get better. But if you're not one of them, it can be really tough to carry on. Every day is a struggle. This is just my story, told through the various media interviews that I gave after becoming probably one of the first. Initially, the biggest problem was being believed. I was told I probably had swine flu, but that was 2 months before Wuhan had even talked about having COVID. This is my doctor and a mental health team. She brought them to my house the day after I came out of hospital from sepsis because she thought my symptoms were just down to psychosis, and she tried to section me under the Mental Health Act because she could not believe all the strange symptoms that every day I was reporting and showing her on video and reporting by audio and by email. Obviously, it was confusing, but I could have done with a little bit more support.
I was at London Gatwick Airport on the 22nd of December when 7 plane flights came in from Wuhan that day, and I stayed in the hotel airport that night with people that came off those flights.
What's the impact been on your life, Nick?
It's ripped me. I used to be a really self-confident, independent, successful person, and the one thing that I hate most is my dependency on everybody for everything.
There are over 35,000 people in the LongCovid support group who, like me, are fairly young, some very young, who have lost their eyesight, who are in wheelchairs. I used to ride motorbikes across the Cotswolds. I haven't been able to walk my dogs 200 yards. LongCovid is a serious illness. It's being investigated today in Parliament, and I urge you to watch and support it, because without recognition, and with silly clinics just taking tick box research, we're not going to be able to cure it.
Also, not because so much of physical, but mental illness, because I had a real sort of breakdown type incident, because I can't face the idea of another 6 months being locked on my own with Christmas Day and New Year's Day on my own in my house with nobody. It's really, really getting to me.
Of course, that sounds awful. And this is, the stories, these are the stories that we forget about when we're getting so lost in the headlines and the data and the news, that there are people like you, Nick, who are at home and have been at home for 9 months.
That LongCovid support group we mentioned earlier that Claire Hasty runs. Nick Mitchell joins me now. Nick, good evening to you.
Good evening, Kate.
It's not a title that anyone wants, is it really? The longest suffering member of that Facebook group?
No.
Just tell me about how you're feeling right now. You obviously contracted COVID 12 months ago. What's the situation for you now?
Well, like Claire said, having an anniversary of 12 months is something, firstly, I never thought I'd have to get to. And when I did get to it, and indeed it was actually Christmas Day, it was 25th December 2019 when I first became ill. And when I had to face that, bearing in mind I'm locked down, living on my own, spending Christmas and New Year completely on my own. I haven't seen a person other than repair people, doctors and hospitals and paramedics for 10 months now. So it was pretty horrific, in all honesty.
It is pretty horrific. I mean, it's an ongoing situation for you.
It's been 13 months now since I've been suffering with the effects of LongCovid. I was one of the first members of one of the largest support groups, the LongCovid support group, longcovid.org, that has 37,000 members. And over the last weeks and months, as COVID cases have risen, we expect there's at least another 10,000 people who are also like us, starting to suffer long COVID, with a long journey ahead that will probably include some sort of organ damage, problems with mobility, clearly loss of taste and smell, but also, like myself, loss of eyesight, loss of mobility, not even being able to walk. I've had sick notes going back to the 2nd of January. That's over 13 months without any sort of income. No COVID income, no benefit income. And the policies that I've been paying money into for 20 or 30 years to cover me for critical, serious illnesses don't cover me for long COVID.
Jobs, they would argue that actually there has been an education process there.
Okay, so there has to be. Don't die of ignorance. COVID is not just about death.
there are 600,000 people with long-term illnesses that are blind and in wheelchairs and, like me, unable to walk because of COVID. People need to know that.
Yeah.
And they don't. And this is why this show is meant for experiences like this, because honestly, Nick, thank goodness that you called today,